had some sort of semblance of
Yeah.
bringing everyone's discussion to an apologies for that, but we will have discussion at the end, so don't worry. This session, and thank you very much for coming and joining myself and David Mosey. This is a workshop, so it will be interactive. Hopefully you can all hear me, but everyone can obviously raise questions as well and hear them. So what's this going to be about? Well, first of all, introductions. I'm Kate Saunders. I'm a partner at Trowers Hamlins. We're a law firm, and I, in particular, specialise in construction contracts and collaborative forms of contract, which is going to be the theme of this session, particularly the ACA Alliance in Forms of Contract, which, and I've got my lovely copy here. We've got books and everything, which is fantastic. It's what you do for a workshop. Is PPC 2000 and FAC 1, which David's going to be talking about. PPC 2000 was obviously published several years ago now, 2025. We are now since 25 years ago, and we have got a new version which is shortly to come out, so I will touch on that in a bit. David, who is Professor David Mosey, CBE, and he's a Professor of Construction Law at King's College London, and authors, wrote PPC 2000 25 years ago, and also FAC 1 more recently, and he's going to cover that contract. But it's sort of more than about the contracts. Obviously, it's going to be an important workshop about contracts, but it is really setting the tone for how we can deliver some of the things that Lord Best was mentioning earlier, and I thought, yeah, we're all quite stimulated by that start to the morning, aren't we? Because I think he really focused on some of the things that we've been struggling with over many years in the construction sector, skills, collaboration, driving a pipeline of supply for modular housing in particular. So those are sort of things that we're going to try and unlock in this workshop, and how the contracts can be the support mechanism for that. Before I hand over to David, who's going to look at the Framework Alliance contracts being a mechanism to pull together that pipeline of supply and demand, I was going to say that Trowers' experience in the housing sector, which has supported many clients to embrace MMC over the last few years, is that setting up frameworks was the starting point. So that was, let's get everybody in the public sector to collaborate and not just do those mini pilot projects which weren't really going anywhere, which were costing more than they needed to, and therefore putting people maybe off that product line. Let's collaborate, bring together that supply and demand, and of course we have had a number of frameworks come out into the public sector which are doing exactly that, and I know those have been supported by Homes England, the NHF as well, so things like Building Better, Offsite Housing Alliance, OSHA, London Housing Corp, LHC, Crown Commercial Service. There are frameworks out there, but that's part of the story, and David will go into more detail about what Framework Alliance contract properly alliancing can demonstrate as well, not just collaborating with the supply and demand aspect, but actually the delivery. On the delivery contracts, yes, PPC 2000, people have been using it again for 25 years, but it is working on projects where you're looking at things in a different way, and I suppose this is all about new homes, new ways. Is this a chance for us to look at the way we have contracting structures for building projects that is different, that is looking at collaboration at an early stage, bringing in contractors at an early stage, suppliers and specialists at an early stage. Again, Lord Best touched on the impact of building safety we just mentioned, but bring everybody in at a much earlier stage to a construction project. So we know that those things can really change the dynamics of projects, from a good project to an even better project, or a distressed project into something that turns the corner into a much better quality project. So we will be talking a little bit about that, and what the PPC can do, and the PPC 25 which is coming out, and what add-ons does it have that really, again, reflect lots of things we've just heard about, focus on future home standards, sustainability, digital. I mean, it was honestly like as if we'd written the start to this workshop before, all the things we worry about, trying to improve the market in terms of digital knowledge, using BIM, getting sustainable projects on the ground, so again, having clauses in a contract that cover that, bringing everyone together in a collaborative format in a multi-party way. But anyway, I'm not going to start going on about the PPC in terms of delivery. I think it would be much better if David set the scene and talked a little bit more about FAC 1 as the building blocks for a good alliancing. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Katie. Morning, everyone. How do we operate slides?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was a slide person.
Slide person.
Yeah.
Really? I do many slides if I just know which button to press.
Okay,
Then you
if you
sit
want
down.
to, yeah, there we go. It's just the right hand side.
Splendid.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Look, I'm really glad to have this opportunity, and I was massively impressed and encouraged by Lord Best's speech. I think we all needed a bit of cheering up and encouragement in what we're doing, and he gave us it. And the point is that we do have the know-how, we do have the technology, we do have the will to deliver high-quality housing, but do we have the machinery for aggregation? The one point he made that didn't convince me was that we could create pipelines by mandating a proportion of MMC for each local authority client. That didn't ring true. I think we need machinery that people can buy into, that enables them to combine their needs with the needs of other clients and get some consistency and some shared knowledge. And I think our problem is the Groundhog Day, that we do brilliant things and then we all part company and then we use them perhaps to win another competition and then we do them again. And that isn't progress, that is, flashes of brilliance that don't necessarily move us forward. So having a system whereby people will part with their hard-won IP in terms of a motivation for long-term relationships, whereby clients will trust that their needs can be linked to other clients' needs, and contractors can work with their competitors, to me, is the only effective way to create a pipeline. And has anybody heard of constructing the gold standard? Show of hands? Well, it's available online. I wrote it. It was my lockdown project. Had 120 participants in it because they were in lockdown as well. And although it was aimed at central government, we brought in a lot of local government and a lot of housing provider input. And in terms of its implementation, it's 24 recommendations which look at strategic procurement through frameworks. There's a lot of take-up. And there is, I wasn't allowed to mention FAC1, but obviously when I went out on consultation, I was delighted that participants did. But there is a synergy between those recommendations, which you can, as I say, please do download and have a look at and quiz me on if you like, and the contractual mechanisms I'm going to talk about. But Katie's point is right, this is not all about contracts. The gold standard took me out of my comfort zone because we had to look at client strategy, their statement of intent, if you like, procurement in terms of putting enough information to the market and then getting constructive proposals from the market and then finding a way to use them, not wholesale just because the winner said so, but because you want to harvest these good things. That's an integrational role for contracts. And then incentivising management rather than just thumbs up, thumbs down, and the sort of industry of KPIs without progress. So when we did the consultation on constructing the gold standard, frameworks were seen as the best medium through which procurement and contracting can deliver transformational improvements. So, we can have a talk about dynamic purchasing systems, joint ventures. There's models out there in the world, but frameworks properly structured are a very sound mechanism for multiple contracting authorities, in the public sector, multiple clients, and long-term relationships with Tier 2, Tier 3 supply chain members that take us into the realm of social value and environmental improvement. So that was the big headline with a picture of a groundhog. I haven't got illustrations for every slide. And that takes us to FAC1, this contract form, which when we were putting together the case studies, it was very interesting to see the framework alliance contracts, these multi-party strategic documents that sit above the individual building contracts, delivered on average 18.5% agreed cost savings, not oppressive cost savings, the actual machinery for agreed cost savings, combined with social value, environmental value, improved safety, improved quality. It can be done. We did a big conference at King's where people said, what is the cost of social value? What do you have to add? What do you have to take out of somebody's profit? You don't. If you have strategic relationships that work with all members of the supply chain, you can examine what cost efficiencies can be delivered and what local businesses, regional businesses, are best placed to deliver environmental and social improvements. It's machinery, it's not a magic wand, but it's machinery. And the gold standard contributors, to my utter delight, said yes, they wanted a standard form, collaborative framework contract. They didn't want to be faced with bespoke ones that have been dreamt up by a local authority lawyer or a private lawyer, because lawyers, that's what I am, just love writing things. They wanted to see the same thing, they wanted some consistency. It's expensive to create and review new documents every time you go out to tender, every time you bid. And they wanted a focus on outcomes, and they wanted flexibility, and they felt that this kind of becomes an engine room. This contract complements the drive of the people, the innovation of the industry. It helps the machinery go forward. It's not, as we often see contracts, a blocker or an administrative burden. And yes, as I say, to my delight, they did mention FAC1, and indeed the government has backed it in the construction playbook. And indeed, NEC as a contract publisher, instead of doing their own, very pragmatically endorsed it and published guidance on it. So it's got a bit of a head of steam and quite a lot of use. So that is a correct figure. £100 billion worth of procurement over the last 8 years has been put through it. So, sorry, who's heard of FAC1? Not a lot of people. This is a standard form instrument that is a way of delivering new homes in new ways. And there's a book. There's a book on it. The case studies, the guidance. There's stuff you can download very effectively in this. So I'm really glad to be speaking to people who haven't heard of it, because I think it could be useful to you. And I'll explain why it's relevant to MMC. It doesn't stand on its own. It's for use with a series of JCT contracts, series of NEC's, PPC contracts that Katie will talk about. It does the things those contracts don't do. It does the things that program and project managers want to do, but it creates this shared and integrated approach on commercial terms. And I would say it brings to life strategic collaboration. What does it do? What do you do through this thing? Joint project planning and risk management. These are strategic issues. You can't just get interested in this when you call off your first project under a framework. It's not just an administrative tool to create a taxi rank of favoured contractors or consultants. You've got to think jointly. Certainly if you want to deliver MMC, you've got to plan jointly, and you've got to think of the risks jointly. Lord Best's point about all the eggs in one basket, what are we willing to go into, and who are we doing it with, and on what terms, is joint planning and risk management. Integrated and consistent working practices. If we're taking an MMC solution and putting it with a range of other activities, because it isn't the entirety of the project, we want to do that consistently. If we want a whole life approach that is essential for environmental purposes and safety purposes, we're going to integrate the capital phase with the operational phase on a consistent basis so that everybody is getting an outcome they can manage. And if we're looking to improve that, if we want those savings, we want the social outcomes, the environmental outcomes, that is a joint planning thing. There's no point in just saying, Mr. Contractor, you're appointed, your KPI is X, in terms of carbon emissions, don't care how you do it, but you're off if you don't manage it, because they won't be able to. Nobody's hiding their environmental improvements. They're just not enabling them as much as they might if they work jointly. Every client we know recognises the climate crisis. Every consultant, every contractor has commitments corporately. Put together some joint machinery whereby the parties learn from each other, and this starts to really motor. I had a major firm of structural engineers complaining that their NEC contracts punished them if they didn't deliver net zero, but didn't connect them to the contractor or the manufacturers. So the engineers can design whatever they like, but if it's not feasible through the manufacturers and it's not adopted by the contractors, they'll just get punished under their NEC contract. This isn't quite what we're looking for through contracts. There is this clear system of IP protections. What information you're sharing, what is your USP in the industry. That's got to be voluntary. But you capture that commitment at tender stage, you set out timetables for how that will be put into effect ahead of all the water projects in terms of what is in the common interest and what is frankly not rocket science versus what is bespoke to an individual player. And a timetable is the thing. I'm obsessed with timetables. All my career I've seen colourful Gantt charts and then incredibly complex critical path programs used by disputes lawyers and disputes experts. And never that interface of deadlines with binding deadlines on the client and then recognition of things that come from third parties. But timetables for everything. We go into meetings, we agree a lovely outcome, we walk away and think, oh God, we didn't agree a deadline. We get back to the next meeting, things haven't happened as you'd expect. It's so simple, but contractualising that and managing that is a function of a proper framework alliance contract. What was that? Moved on to
Yeah, I know, but it's fine
I hate it when it does that. And supply chain collaboration is not a buzzword. It's something that's been around for a long time. This notion, I say it every time I speak, and I don't think people believe it, so I'll say it now, very clearly. You can appoint tier ones through public procurement on a basis of agreed profit levels and overarching budgets and how they will deliver those budgets. And the complexity of evaluating value is greater than the complexity of evaluating lowest price. But it can be done, and it is being done. And Katie and her colleagues have written a lot on exactly how it can be done. Rebecca Rees is a wizard in this zone. When you've done that, you have space to revisit the tier 2 and tier 3 supply chain. You're not stuck with the ones the contractors used when they bid for the framework. You're not trapped. They didn't know who they were using. They haven't even got the project specified or the locations. They know who they prefer, who they get along with, and those guys might be right. But the idea of revisiting it and saying, right, have we got the same subcontract opportunities in duration? Have we held, contractors mostly award for 6 months, and even if they've been given a 5-year programme? Have we looked at local capability? Have we looked at the specialist skills of people who work in communities? Have we given thought to bringing those together in a consistent way? That machinery has been available for 10 years. It does not need another public procurement. It is not nominating subcontractors and taking away risk from tier ones. And I'll probably keep saying it to my dying day. And one day, it will get some critical mass. But doing it at a strategic level is built into this contract. And I really think that is where you can scrutinise every aspect of MMC and how it bolts together with other supply chains. I'm probably taking too long, Katie, so just be a little bit longer. Yes, it's recommended. 2020 report, build homes, build jobs, build innovation. That's Mark Farmer, wasn't it?
And Mike D, I think.
And Mike D, absolutely. And they recommended FAC1. That idea of enabling one or more clients to integrate housing programs. This concept of aggregation that seems so elusive and so challenging. We've got linked, I said there was a link to the gold standard, I do hope you'll glance at. That expressly recommends that we need to improve supplier investments in NMC and other off-site technology by awarding framework call-off contracts for portfolios of work. So you're aggregating within the aggregating model. You're getting something clear for the marketplace, one or more clients getting together. That's a very sensible construction playbook policy that we've taken into constructing the gold standard. And that, through FAC1, takes the work of multiple tier ones and integrates it with tier 2 and tier 3 supply chain members transparently. We've talked about insolvencies. When ISG went bust, Minister of Justice had a number of these for their sub-alliances, for new prisons, which also, by the way, used MMC. ISG was gone, it's a disaster, but one of the other contractors within that alliance could step into their work, and the tier 2 consistent strategic supply chain was there. I'm not saying nobody lost any money, but a lot fewer people lost money, and we were not in the wild west of insolvency practitioners. So, it's ghastly, people go bust, but you can take mitigating measures through a multi-party instrument. And as I said, this local and regional approach, this idea of getting to local manufacturers, it's not all national, and if we've got national MNC manufacturers, are there local specialists who can deliver mixing and matching skills, is a very, very important part of a holistic approach, and indeed capturing, as Lord Best said, the skills to deliver the manufactured solutions. I really am coming to the end now. Katie mentioned Proud Commercial. They had their off-site construction. These are FAC1 users, 29 manufacturers. There's a big focus on housing in their solutions, even though they start with government departments. They're offering their frameworks to housing associations and local authorities. Katie, I think, mentioned the Building Better and Procurement for Housing and the Off-Site Homes Alliance, and knows a good deal more than I do about both of those. But they're substantial MMC frameworks with multiple registered providers aggregating their programs so as to have a substantial flow of work. And that recognise that sharing information and learning are critical to improving MMC take-up. I wait for your comments with bated breath, whatever they will be. And I mentioned Ministry of Justice in a different non-housing zone, creating MMC solutions for a range of custodial projects. So I am done now. You can, I would suggest, if we all want to collaborate, we can all get distracted by what I call the Bermuda Triangle of speaking in very idealistic terms and then being undercut by cynical critics who say, it won't work, and finding, the third part of the triangle is that our good intentions just don't get realised. FAC1 is proving more successful than that. You can have a look at it online, you can have a look at constructing a gold standard online, and then you can rush out and buy a top read of the shape of the framework. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
I feel like we ought to actually pause and do some questions now, because we will have some questions about, collaboration through frameworks, I'm sure, before we move on to delivery of project contracts. So, David, you're not over yet. Let's take your question.
Sorry, I was laughing because I was amused by the £800 million, so 800 houses and 600 million houses, 750,000 each, seem awfully expensive for houses.
Right.
So overall shape, love it. My challenge would be, I'm chair of Core House Limited, desperately trying to make a living in MMC. I think desperate is probably a good word this week. The aggregation of demand here. You build a prison, schools, hospitals, dead easy, big.
Yeah.
Come along and talk to a housing association, you talk to a local authority, say, we want 4 of these, we want 2 of them, we want a green one over here.
Yeah.
So the aggregation problem at the demand end is massive. And of course, their organisational models tend to, I want to procure some of them, then I'll procure some of these, and they fragment it, which makes it very, very difficult for the next level up to council is pull it all together into a coherent.
It is the biggest challenge. The constructing the gold standard that you're all going to read just before you buy my book.
I'll buy yours if you'll buy mine.
There you go. I'll say very well. I'm doing a book swap. The constructing gold standard has a verification scheme, which is being run by Constructing Excellence, with government support. I'm positive about government. Cabinet Office, who I always thought was quite cynical, outriders, turn up to our meetings and actively support what we're doing in verifying the gold standard. So it's not just a report that gathers dust. It's got independent verifiers, there's one standing next to me, from a range of skills, engineer, QS, lawyer, academic. And my point there is, in seeking verification, and there are 5, there's Crown Commercial, there's SCAPE, there's LHC, there's Places for People, and there's CHIC. So it's national, regional, a lot of focus on housing. We're asking, what are the challenges? Number 1 challenge, you've articulated it very well. And we've said, look, it's your job. As framework providers, you are managing the framework. We will help you, but you have to find ways to show these individual clients that they're stronger together and they'll get better value together, but they have to think collectively. It doesn't cost them more money to think collectively. They haven't got any money, they've got needs, they genuinely believe their needs are different to other people's. You know, it's only through the management of that framework that you have these multi-party dialogues amongst clients to create a credible and manageable pipeline. So the challenge is exactly as you described it. The good news is that these framework providers are committed, and with the support of Constructing Excellence, are committed to finding ways to persuade clients to do that, and then obviously to manage that integration.
You're a lawyer, you'll have heard the expression "but." I design organisations. My day job is designing organisations and the way they make decisions. Every organisation you go into says, "That's all very well, because we're different."
Yes.
The blue side is that there is the exceptionalism that runs across. I don't know, you sort of go and talk to a development director in an HA or a local authority, well, it's got to be this because so you can't have what they're having.
I totally get it.
We need 3 millimetres more in the roof space because people in Lancashire are a bit taller than us. And all that sort of stupidity gets in the way.
They can't bloody have it, can they?
And
It's as simple as that, really.
so
They've got a measure of pragmatism.
For them, it's existential for them. They're preserving their lifestyle, their role, their job in life, their position in the organisation through the exceptionalism. And if you are nicely brutal about it, you can kind of say, get over yourself, you're having a blue one, but that has limits.
Well, look, human nature is a funny thing. You know, lawyers like to write rough contracts and they like disputes. You know, QSs like to count great big piles of pricing documents. You know, and you're right. Within client organisations, there's and within contractual organisations, there's all sorts of people who manage trouble. I met a chief QS who physically banged his head on the table in a negotiation because he said, you know, the bastards are all out to get us. I just have to find out who and when. You know, we're all coming from a place that is different. What we're talking about are new ways, and the support of a significant number of framework providers and their clients and a best practice organisation is good. We have to link it into all the other moving parts, but this machinery is proven to work. Taking it to people, you know, studying it for yourselves, and then taking it to the people you work with and saying, hang on a minute, this is a standard form, this isn't a trick, you know, and this works, we're not going to make fools of ourselves, is helpful. The naysayers, well, you heard Lord Best on the subject of NIMBYs and blockers, you know, they hopefully will not be NIMBYs and blockers. Please.
Yeah, just because I think this is the challenge, and I think the whole point of trying to think collectively and collaboratively is what are all the bits that you need to align. So we know absolutely that sort of aggregation, demand, aggregation of land supply is key. We talked quite a bit yesterday, for those here, around standardisation, right? We recognise that to align with MMC, clearly the idea that each local authority wants its own, you know, there's obviously local context vernacular, but we need to really understand standardisation. I think the point of looking at the FAC1 particularly is what's that legal machinery that needs to be in place. So it's looking at this whole ecosystem. I think what makes me nervous is when we try and fix a bit of the puzzle over here, but we haven't got that whole solution worked through. And so it's land, it's funding, you know, it's the aggregation, it's the standardisation, it's the land supply, it's the capital, you know, who's going to pay. But right at the nexus of this is always going to be, you know, even if you've got all the will in the world, if you haven't got that right legal machinery, what we'll find out is in 6 months' time we've got a lot of legal disputes, a lot of failure, a lot of insolvency, or a lot of risk being passed down the supply chain because there wasn't really understanding how we're going to mitigate the risk. So I think, you know, that's why I'm so committed to this being part of the debate, because one of the questions I have is, who drives this discussion back into local government?
No, I'm not objecting.
Yeah, I know you're not.
I'm not objecting to it. It's marvellous. Until we get human beings involved.
Well, this is the point. So I think I wanted to place it in the context of the wider opportunity and an invitation to really look at that collaboration, but then also to look at the humanity of this, which is, so who drives this conversation? You know, we do a lot of work with local government. Well, I will tell you now that our lawyers are not across, you know, this as a template and a format. So I also need the people that we're looking to contract with saying, well, we want to use we want this to be a way that we engage, because at the moment, if I'm just trying to push it internally, but the client side that we're trying to, supply chain we're engaging with isn't saying this is really critical to us to get a better sense of collaboration and understanding of risk, our lawyers will go the route they've always gone.
So
It's repeat and
one
rinse.
final one before I shut up and leave the room to everybody else. Of the however many people are here over the 2 days, I've been sort of staring at people's badges, and what I haven't registered, and I may be wrong, is I haven't registered a development director from an HA, or a development director from a local authority, or a chief executive from one of those sitting in the room listening to us saying, if we could aggregate demand, we could make it all work. So if they aren't here, can we organise another event to get them here?
Yeah, so
Please.
So, and again, just to give you some reassurance, those conversations are happening inside different rooms, and I wouldn't want to overpromise, but I wouldn't also want to create. There is massive pressure to come up with answers, and Jess has been in some of these conversations too. There is a real moment of people saying, how are we going to do this differently with national government support? So those conversations are happening. It's very hard to get all those people in a room because of their diaries. So there was actually an event I was in Manchester on Monday. 6 of the core cities were represented by exactly those people asking these same questions.
Was it a question at the back? Did you have a
Yeah,
question?
thank you. Rachel McCrory from Nottingham-Trent University. I'm an urban geographer, a social scientist, and I think it's really important to hear both from your kind of legal expertise, which I think, and thinking around procurement, which is often overlooked but is so essential to this debate and to this agenda. Excuse my terrible cold. So I guess I've got a question about the legal resourcing within local authorities when they're completely, bankrupt, under-resourced and stretched, and especially on protecting that civic value when partnerships are required, like with venture capital and operating at scale, both for new build and retrofit. How to build that legal capacity within local authorities.
Yes.
And then a question also around, I guess, devolution, working across multiple local authorities as regions, and another question around the procurement bill and how that, does that have any bearing?
Okay.
It's not my area of
Got three questions.
Yeah.
And I hold those thoughts. Yeah. Tick, 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 tick. I've got answers to all of them. When I did my work on construction gold standard, everybody very kindly shared their current framework agreements with me. Some of which were already FAC1, so I could celebrate that. Some of which, with what I was looking for, were framework contracts that turned commitments into actions. As I say, I've seen them as call off, KPIs, start procurement again. And I don't know how many friends I'll lose in the next sentence, but the quality of the work that was undoubtedly done by in-house local government legal departments on those framework agreements was not stellar, and they're locked in for the next few years. Why would they, because that's what everybody did. It's not like JCT gave them a useful model or NEC. Their framework agreements are not their best shot. So people were coming up with these things that were pretty routine. To go to a legal department and say, right, there's now a standard form. You really don't need to be a specialist procurement lawyer to bolt your needs into this standard form. And did I mention there's a guy? And so actually that is taking the heat off them because they have felt compelled to draft bespoke forms in the past, and there's a wide variety of them. Some of them are dynamic, they're two-party, so they don't do what we've just been discussing, but at least they're dynamic. Some of them are very dull, and unfortunately I know where all the bodies are buried, but I can't tell you because I promised not to. So legal, really, they need help, and as long as they know about it, that's good, and ditto their procurement officers. But now I've forgotten the next two questions.
Devolution, working across local authorities.
Okay, devolution. This is multi-client, and that is really important. This idea of whether they're all combined through whether there's a lot of restructuring in combination is a policy matter. But multiple public sector clients can work together through that medium because it's a multi-client medium. The management of it is a consultative, process combined with an alliance manager. Things can be instructed, other things need to be agreed. That collaborative machinery is very forensic, in terms of getting everybody's involvement. What was the third one? Because I Procurement Act. No,
In terms
I
of
really-
encouraging
I
SMEs.
really, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry again.
Well,
SMEs.
in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
encouraging
Yeah.
SMEs.
Okay, no, the way the Procurement Act directs you in terms of who you have to go out to, obviously doesn't change the vehicle that you use for that purpose, and I think my point is, whatever you do there, you get another go. If you've appointed larger tier ones, that is not the end of the story. Here, supply chain collaboration systems enable you as a set of clients to say, right, tier ones, you're in. We're now going to look at opportunities for SMEs, and particularly local SMEs, broad church, local businesses, and what do they offer that the people you've been working with before don't. And that strategic exercise, which obviously has to be done ahead of call-off, because suddenly call-off is a matter of some impatience, is at the heart of the machinery. So there's great questions, but there are answers. But I need to sit down. Katie needs to pick this up.
Well, it's all right. I mean, if we're into the delivery side, so that's perfect timing.
All right,
So
there you go.
I will just say, because I'm really delighted, as people say, that they haven't heard enough about FAC1, and hopefully this is about new homes, new ways, and new contracts. So yeah, for those people, if we're looking at delivery and getting into the delivery side, don't lose all those brilliant things you've agreed collaboratively at framework level, and go into the wrong form of contracts on delivery, doing exactly as Jez had said. Going what we used to do, because that's always the way we've done it. And actually, and I feel guilty of this ourselves when we've been promoting on MNC projects what form of contract to use. If people are very wedded to a very traditional form of contract that they've always used, that does take a lot of risk and puts it from the public sector onto the developer, contractor and the supply chain, and they feel comfortable with that, and they're not going to go ahead because there's too many new things going on in this whole thing. I'd be going, okay, fine, we'll just adapt JCT design build and put some stuff about off-site construction in there. And so I feel guilty that I've been doing that, because really what we should have been saying is, let's use a different form of contract that does promote the things you want to do at that delivery level. So that's PPC and PPC 25, which is coming out to a publisher near you soon, which we've updated Trowers and David's input exercise to update for the sort of the modern era. So has anyone used PPC as we did the show of hands of FAC? Great. Well, we are then doing something that is, some new stuff, which is great. So I had loads of slides that Jessie told me off about. So I am now going to be put to rights that I should not have had. So many slides that I shouldn't have done there. So what we were going to cover was, different forms of delivery contract. We talked about setting up your alliance, your framework alliance, in the right way to start off with. And given we've got, we've had the magic of tonight, WMTA, West Midlands Combined Authority come together with the local authority in their area, just imagine, and they've all signed an FAC with a set of key contractors, installers and MMC providers. This is fantastic. We've gone through the Procurement Act, that hasn't been a barrier, it's been an enabler, all the things that we hope would happen. And now we're into calling off that framework and delivery of a real life project. So what are you going to use? Are you going to use, a PPC, let's hope, a multi-party contract, and try and avoid going down a route which is going to deviate you away from the good things you've agreed at framework level. So this is just really saying, I said I've got too many slides. What is PPC? Why is it slightly different? Why would you use it on an MMC project? Apologies, I'm just using MMC as my broad brush approach, because I appreciate we're much more nuanced than that, and Lord Beth certainly picked up the differences between the categories of 1 to 7. So, but broadly, when we're talking about off-site manufacture, why would you want to use a multi-party contract? Why would you want to contract with a pre-construction phase? One with timetables, we won't get David started again, and some with a collaborative approach. Well, I think the reason, it's obvious, isn't it? We need to have a contract that recognises the key role of the manufacturer in this process. That's, it's ludicrous to think, and I'm pretty sure we do have some very lovely contractors in the room who've built the fantastic roll along and weights home outside. But that has definitely been, I'm sure Hugh will say, a collaborative journey between themselves and Roll On. But the Roll On could not have done it without them. They had to be key to that process. They had to be sitting at the top table, round the table, with the grown-ups, having that discussion with weights, with the client, with the commissioning client. And also, you can't just get involved when you're starting to put that, structure outside. I mean, that's not when day one is. Day one has been a long time ago, hasn't it? It's been pre-construction, it's been all the work that's gone into this, leading up to. And Roll On, whose name I've just completely forgotten, Paul has told me about the 350 emails it's taken to get the permission to get it on the site. So this, there's a lot of work that goes in there. Design, planning, the work in the factory for whatever components you're building in there. So you need a contract that recognises that. And what best form to sign up something that you confirm at that pre-construction stage, where everyone's signing the same document together. It may be conditional on various things such as working out the full design, the full planning, the full price, but at least you're in a structure already at an early point. And then, there's a commitment to proceed together and work collaboratively with a timetable. And I know we can see this happening more. We are doing, our team from Trowers here doing more pre-construction services agreements than ever before, but they are a separate agreement that leads then into another contract. This obviously covers everything in the same contract. So where, we've got rafts of recommendations. This is the idealistic bit that David mentioned. People are saying you should be doing this, just get on and do it. We've got reference in the construction playbook, obviously, and the MMC guidance notes. So the other thing that is good about getting everybody into contract early is having early consultant appointments, because we're recognising the importance of manufacturers in this scenario, in these projects, but also the consultancy side as well. So getting them signed up to the same contract, they can sign this contract, and then obviously getting the specialist suppliers, manufacturers involved very, very early as well. These are just wonderful quotes that just sort of lead us all in the same direction. How does it do that? Well, what we want to do in the upgraded version of PPC is really get those appointments embedded into the contract with the basic terms agreed and submitted as consult services, and then they can be linked into the PPC contract. This ensures that we've got this collaboration during design development, so that will obviously involve the manufacturer's major input into how they've designed it, what nuances. We're just talking about differences that different public sector housing providers will want, that needs to be finely tuned in the factory environment or on site, but making sure that everyone's clear about exactly what they're doing. IP has been seen, as a bit of a barrier. Have we got, if we all sign up the same document, we're extremely transparent about how we're doing everything together, is that something that some people are going to struggle with because they have an IP in certain aspects of the design, particularly the structures and everything. So, is that a barrier? Well, I think, I've sat around enough rooms of talking about this and people I know well here. I think people admit the bespoke elements of a design of maybe a fully volumetric house are not that bespoke. So the process might be a bit more bespoke. If you go into different factories, it's quite different. So those are elements that people want to hang on to, but actually, being much more open about design, which means that things like BIM and the use of BIM in design development can be, again, plugged into this. So we have all these things in the contract which talks about design development. We also have provisions dealing with BIM within the contract. That's been much more closely sort of brought into the contract, the forefront of the contract, rather than an additional option in PPC at the moment. But in the new version, we will be really focusing on how BIM can be embodied in everyone's obligations under the contract. And these are, again, really important things that we need to look at this, and it was great to hear those questions earlier about digital and moving the sector on. And that's sort of where it sits. This is where they've been using, obviously, BIM of the Ministry of Justice, but also embedding this in contract obligations within the new contract. And then again, sustainability. We all want to do this on a delivery of a contract. Write down what you want to do. This is I can't move on, but anyway, it's probably come to the end. So sustainability, future home standard was mentioned. Let's also talk about what action plan and write down the action plan to your net zero. It's all right, it's okay. I'll carry on. Sustainability. So we've got obligations to produce a net zero sustainability action plan in the contract and agree the, what the project carbon budget will be, which will include also, additional, the indirect emissions such as under scope 3 as well. So that is all written in the new version. We've also got project bank accounts. Everyone familiar with project bank accounts? Again, recommended years ago, 2012, or people have been saying this is a good idea to get the flow. This is critical for stopping those the vulnerabilities of our manufacturers, either in the room today, but just saying the cash is clean. I was at a discussion yesterday with talking about the impact of ISG, and David's mentioned that maybe the security you can get to be in our framework if you have something like that. But it was more about the fact that the structure of the construction, where payments go and how we're all living on our credit cards, within a contractor business, that means that the money's not passing down to the manufacturers as quickly as it should do. So having some sort of, contractual obligation to set up a project bank account, for it to be a digital project bank account potentially, to have those payments flowing very, very quickly through, automatically, so everyone gets paid at the same time, and we then, are able to sustain the more vulnerable elements of the supply chain. Building safety is covered in PPC 25, essential early contractor involvement, obviously, getting those designs developed. Oh, I don't know what I've done. No, I know what I've done. Let me just go on to here. There we go. So that was sustainable project bank accounts, obviously. These are transparency in supply chain, building safety. We don't need a reminder about that. Again, it's all in everyone's front of their minds. And like Diana was saying, how it is, the process is obviously really important, but it is taking time. Having a contract that really recognises that you've got to go through those processes to get on site, particularly if you're building a high-risk building, gateway 3s, and those processes are all embedded in the new form of the contract. So this is where we are. This is what we've taken the recommendations and we've written it in, as David said. We love to do that, lawyers. But it's really saying that try and find a contract that is going to deliver the projects you want. If you set up the framework and the alliance structures, you have the collaboration of the procurement exercise that you've done, don't lose it at delivery stage, and use the right form of contract that brings everybody to the table at a much quicker stage in a collaborative forum, and have all the elements that you want to cover: sustainability, prompt payments, building safety, and use of BIM, all in that contract without you having to think about it. Back to that really great point about the support that the public sector needs, particularly in local authorities from their legal teams, is it's all written down there to start off with. You're not spending oodles of time writing it again. So that's basically just getting rid of us as a support mechanism. But Trowers are here to help. If it's all written in the contract, there's less help needed. I think that's absolutely essential for the public first. So I will leave it there because I can hear the clapping from next door, which means that they've finished, and I wouldn't want to carry on. But we do obviously have some chance to have a few questions about maybe PPC 2000 and PPC 25.
Fabulous, thank you so much. I am going to pause us there and do come and grab Katie and David in the break and ask your questions there. We're going to pause now, and there's coffee and tea outside. We are running slightly behind our printed formal schedule because we started our first session slightly later. So we're not going to cut into a coffee break, don't worry, we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to have coffee. So we will have the full 45-minute coffee break. So we'll be back for our next sessions in here or in there at 12 o'clock instead of 11:45. So the next session at 12 o'clock gives you 45 minutes to ask your questions, to get your teas and coffees, to make sure you meet some of the people in the rooms. But I want to say an absolute huge thank you to Trowers Hamlins, to Katie and to David. Please can you join me in this session.
Can I just make one plea as well? I'm an ex-lawyer, and I just want to recognise, I think this is an extraordinary piece of work, and actually, we've got to work out culturally how we pivot from the way we're currently doing the whole contractual model for construction. And so the idea that we're going to carry on as we are and see change without realising there's a different contractual platform here that actually can work for those SMEs, particularly those Paralysed 2 contractors, is really critical. So I just want to say thank you to David and Katie, because I think we focus a lot necessarily on the build, right? We really do, and understandably, and the sustainability and all the other opportunities of acceleration. If we don't get this framework right, it will tip over for all sorts of reasons. But this builds collaboration into. So can we please, my plea is, not forget this is a key part of our debate. And the work's been done is extraordinary. So again, just my appreciation for the work, the years of work that have gone into this thinking, I think it's critical. So thank you to the team today. Thank you.